Welcome to the Educate a Girl podcast series. Educate a Girl has set the goal of providing 1,000 young women from 5 continents with scholarships in journalism and media training to strengthen women's voices in media and improve professional gender representation in the field. This series acts as an educational platform for students, professionals, and the recreational listener. Each podcast explores a topic in media and journalism featuring a special guest. Our speaker today is Melanie Coulson, the Director of Content and Engagement at Canada 2020. It's an independent progressive think tank here in Canada. Coulson has been working in communications for about 2 years, after 16 years as a digital journalist. You can follow her on Twitter at Mel_Coulson. In this episode, we spoke about the do's and don'ts of blogging and where to start.
The first thing to consider when you're thinking about starting a blog would be, what is it I want to write about? There are 2 things about writing a blog that you have to remember, and one is how often can you write and who is your audience you're going after. So I always tell people when they're thinking about starting to write, what is it that interests you? And that's a great way to start. The most successful blogs are the ones that are written the most often. So choose something that you're interested in and you want to write about a lot. And so that would be your niche area. And then also look at what other people are doing on their blogs too. And do you want to tell your blog with stories? Or do you want to have photos? I mean, Tumblr blogs are hugely successful as well because they're visual. You could also do videos. So a blog doesn't necessarily just have to be words. You can be telling stories in many different formats.
And so, what are some of the necessary steps you should take when you're starting to think about writing a blog?
So the necessary steps, I guess, is there's the technical side. What platform am I going to use? When I've taught blogging, I've always used WordPress just because it's pretty accessible, it's free, and WordPress is pretty easy to kind of wrap your head around quickly. So what platform are you going to use? What are you going to be writing about? Obviously, how often can you commit to writing? And I always think about who's your audience, and so how will you share it with your audience? Is your audience on Twitter? Is your audience on Facebook? And blogging doesn't also necessarily just have to be on WordPress. Having said that, it can also be microblogging. So your blog could be a Facebook page and you just update the Facebook page as you like. Your blog could be a Twitter account and then it's microblogging, which is fast and easy, but there's a lot of noise out there. So it's a little harder to get attention. So think about, I guess, who it is you're trying to attract to read your blog, what you'll be writing about, and also how often you want to write.
And so, what are some of the most common mistakes people make when they start out with their blog?
The big mistakes that I see often are that people are starting huge. They want to have this huge, popular blog that everyone reads, and yet they can only really commit to writing it once a month. And I myself fall into that category. So you need to start small, and then as your popularity grows, you can, maybe you can bring on people and then you can write as a team. That's the other thing we haven't talked about. You don't have to necessarily write your blog on your own. You could have you and 2 of your best friends could go and cover foods that you like or do restaurant reviews together. That way the responsibility of writing a blog is spread among the 3 of you. The subject matter is out there and you're actually drawing in more eyeballs as well. So I think the biggest mistake people make is they aim too high and they maybe try to do too much. So you need to be realistic about how much time and commitment you can dedicate to this. On the other hand, if it's something that you're truly passionate about and maybe you're writing about anyway, it might be something that you just want to do on your own.
And how can you make your blog stand out? You were saying kind of when you're microblogging on a Twitter account, something like that, it can be hard to make your account special and stand out. So how can you make your blog be that special one that people want to read?
And that's a great question because it is so easy to blog on social media or on platforms like WordPress. You have millions of people are blogging. I think there's a crazy statistic, like 25 million blogs out there. So how do you make yours stand out? And that's the big question. And I think it's perhaps it's being niche, and maybe it's you become the blog of your neighborhood. There are blogs in Ottawa that cover just an area like Westboro, and they're hugely popular because they are hyper local, and they can cover stories that the local city paper can't cover. So neighborhood blogs. But find something that matters to a group of people is always going to be interesting to them. I know someone who started a blog on mountain bike tricks. Now that has no interest to me whatsoever, but apparently to the mountain bike community, there's not a lot out there. So it's also worth doing some investigation. What else is out in this space? What's being written? And how do you differentiate yourself from them? And maybe you cover it from a different angle. And so for him, it was, people who put together recycled bikes to do jumps. And that's just something that's not out there. And people love it. Maybe not necessarily me, and it's maybe not necessarily the general public, but it's something that speaks to a niche.
And so when you sit down and start actually writing your blog, what are some things to keep in mind in terms of how blog writing differs from other styles of writing?
So the beauty for me that I love about blog writing is it's a lot more conversational. It's a lot more relaxed. It's kind of halfway to how you would speak on TV, I think, and how you would write an academic essay. I think a good blog has a lot of good facts, a lot of good information in it, but it's written in a way that's accessible. I always think of blogging as the way you would talk to a friend or the way you would tell someone. So journalism 101 is, I'm here, you're not, let me tell you about it. That's reportage. And I think that lends itself to blogging too. And there's a natural storyteller in all of us in that we lead with what's interesting, what's new. So you won't believe what happened today. So for me, I've always thought the best blogs are the ones that have a really great voice. And if the people listening to this think about their favorite blogs out there, it's probably because someone's written in a way that's a little bit different or in a way that appeals to them. And maybe it's because it's a voice that's friendly or it's a voice that's a bit cheeky. There's one mom blogger I follow in the US, and I have nothing in common with her. She's in Texas, and she's called the Blogess. And she has this hilarious way of writing, and she always ends paragraphs with y'all or right. And that's not how I speak at all, but there's just something beautiful in that tone that makes me want to read her. And you would never write an academic piece or a newspaper piece and end it with y'all. But for some reason, for this lovely woman from Texas, it just fits.
It's about having that personal voice and finding your own brand. That's one of my other questions too, is a lot of people say that a blog is a representation of your personal brand. So how does that tie in?
I think absolutely. So anytime you put anything on the internet, job one is just presume anyone's going to see it, but it's an extension of yourself. So absolutely, I think that's another reason why you need to be genuine in your blog, because you can't write in a voice that isn't you. But you're right, it's an extension of building your brand, and it's more of you, it's self-promotion. The other thing about starting a blog, I think that's hugely beneficial and we haven't talked about, is for career aspirations down the road. It can make you very different to another candidate for a job to be able to say on your resume, have you been to, mynewblog.com or whatever you want to call your blog? And I know as someone who's hired a lot of junior communications people and junior journalists, that when they have that electronic extension that I can go visit and discover a bit about them, it's kind of fascinating to learn about someone, and it's a little bit of a pre-interview without even having them in the room. So your blog is absolutely extending your brand beyond what may already exist, and it's an opportunity to promote yourself. It shows that, hey, I'm interested in the world. And maybe your world is, recycled bikes, and maybe your world is food restaurant reviews, but that makes you a fascinating person or a fascinating candidate, and it makes you different from other candidates too. And the beauty is that if you have a blog that you've put on your resume and someone's looked at it, it's something to talk about. Yeah, well, is there anything different you'd like to share about yourself? Well, just so you know, I blog about cupcakes. Something like that, I think, makes you stand out. And oh, really? And so it gives people a sense of who you are, not just what you can do.
And on that note of opportunity and career building, it's also a great way for you to put your work out there. Maybe you can't get your article about cupcakes published in Cupcake Magazine, but you can put it on your blog.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that I think, well, I don't know about you, but I would love to have an article in Cupcake Magazine. And I don't know why we're talking about cupcakes, but yeah, it would be great to have an article that I've written about open government in a policy magazine. Great. But that is a little bit more competitive to get out there, but it's easy for me to put something on a WordPress blog and put out my thoughts and share them and then watch them get shared. And really, there's been no limits to where I want it to go and what I want to say. So the other thing about a blog is you can literally write what you'd like versus having to go through an editor who will then edit or look at what you're saying and, maybe change it or write in a different voice than you wanted to write. And it's opportunity. I think the beauty of blogging is that you can actually do anything with it.
And we've talked about this a little bit, but in terms of keeping up your blog, how important is it to stick to a schedule?
Ooh. Yeah, I think that's what's crucial. And again, a blog doesn't have to necessarily be a huge web presence. It could be as simple as a Facebook page, but it is something that grows with care and feeding. So it is important to keep with a schedule. I'm not sure it's, every Monday morning you must post something, but you need to be aware of, I haven't posted in a while. I know people who have set up a subject matter schedule, and that's helped them with their blogging. So they know that Mondays they write on, if we're sticking with the food theme, Mondays I write on curries. Tuesdays I write on Japanese food. And it gives them a sense of, okay, well, this is what I need to work towards. And it gives them a sense of what subject matter they'll do. I'm not sure you need to be that strict. I think as long as you say, okay, I'm going to blog twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, that'll be great. There's no hard and fast rule. I wish I could say, yes, you must blog 4 times a week. No, it depends. And you might have one blog post that hits it out of the park. It might be another month or 2 before anyone actually reads you. It's a lot of what you feel you can do. But you need to be aware of the more that you blog, the more consistently you blog, you're going to tick some of the search engines and they're going to push you up in a search the more active you are online. The longer that blog sits dormant, the farther it falls down on a search engine. So there are technical sides to wanting to blog more often.
Let's talk a little bit more about search engine optimization, because that's something a lot of people don't know about when they start writing online, and it's a great way to draw eyeballs to your site.
It's funny because when I worked in newspapers, we always talked about writing a beautiful headline, and there was a lot of poetry to it. And I think on the one hand, search engine optimization is great because, or SEO, I'll just call it, is great because it gets more eyeballs to what you're writing. On the other hand, it's kind of the death of that poetic headline writing skills. When I describe search engine robots going out into the web, I always describe them like those little spiders in Minority Report that go out and search and scour for information. So you know that they're out there. So you have to think about how people search. So people search usually by proper names. They search by dates, by locations. So these are all things that you need to put in your headlines because, of course, they're searching headlines in the first 60 characters or so of your story. So you need to think, what is going to grab people. The other thing, though, and this is kind of against the SEO, is the BuzzFeedization of the web, which I think is fascinating because question headlines are doing better. Like 5 reasons to go to this area, of the world are doing just as well as, the search engine stories. People love lists. So they're a great and easy way to start. Like here are 5 highlights from, the football game. They're easy to digest, I think. That's why people like them. Like I wrote a piece recently called How to Change the Culture in Open Government, ? People love that because it's a great question. How do you change the culture in government? It just speaks to, how the world is changing online. You would never put a question mark in a headline in a newspaper because they would argue, well, our job is to tell people things, not ask questions. But I think the web is changing that in that we're all asking questions. And so think about the SEO, yes, but at the same time, you need to think about how you're going to be provocative and get some thoughts out there too.
And coming back to social media, because that's such a big part of sharing your blog, do you have any other tips for how to get the word out about your blog or even about microblogging? So sharing smaller posts on Twitter or Facebook?
So the things that get shared the most on social media across most platforms are visual. So if you have photos, if you have videos, even just snippets like an Instagram video or a 15-second Twitter video, that's going to help sell your blog. And then Facebook actually has an algorithm that puts posts with photos higher up. So even if you are just writing a 200-word piece on why I love this cupcake. Let's go back to that. You should put a photo of that cupcake in there anyway. It's not just good blogging, but it also will help you with SEO and with social to share that and to get that promoted. The piece that I did yesterday, to go back to that, I wrote about, how to change culture in government. I opened with a quote that someone mentioned at a conference, which was, culture eats strategy for breakfast, which is a great quote. So I paired the blog post with a really beautiful shot of bacon and eggs. And at first it was like, what does that have to do with changing culture? But it was provocative enough that it got a lot of shares. And it was funny because I shared it again this morning around 8 o'clock. And I think when people are thinking about bacon and eggs, and it got more shares. And so it goes to speak to the value of adding a photo to your blog to make it more interesting to look at as well. And also adding that to your social media platforms.
I think those were all my questions, unless there was anything else you wanted to add about blogging or scheduling or social media, anything along those lines.
I guess the number one thing I'd really like people to think about when they start their blog is, what am I interested in? Because that interest that you have in a subject will boil over to your audience as well. If you genuinely are not interested in what you're writing about, it's going to be a flat blog and you probably won't be read. So consider what really is your passion, the story you want to tell, and use this as an opportunity to be as creative as you want. It's your space to be creative. So if you want to draw pictures and take photos of them and upload them, you can do that. If you want to take photos and just do a photo blog, you can do that too. Like, it really is an opportunity to be as creative and as self-indulgent as you want to be. This is your space. And again, you are building your brand. So this is your opportunity to be you.
Thank you for listening to the Educate a Girl podcast series. To learn more about Educate a Girl, visit our Facebook page.